Hey guys, SuperHorrorBro Mike here, and in today's video we return to Yeondu High for round 2 of our comprehensive rundown investigating each and every ghost found throughout the story of White Day, a labyrinth named school. If you haven't yet checked out part 1 of this 2-part miniseries, then follow the link at the end of this video to catch up with everything. But with that said, let's not waste any more time as we dive into a look at where to find each of these creepy spectres and what their haunting backstories are all about. This is part 2 of The Ghosts of White Day Explained. There once was a girl named Young-Hee. Her family was poor, and so after her father passed away, she was expected to find work in order to help the family out financially. However, Young-Hee defied her mother's wishes and decided the best way to solve their money problems would be to work hard, finish school top of her class, and get into a good college. The problem was that no matter how hard Young-Hee worked, she would always place second in her class. A cheerful girl named Se-young, who never seemed to study for anything, always bested her. Young-Hee was frustrated and confused, but driven to study harder and harder. She studied so hard that she became sick and exhausted each day. The final exam of the school year was held. Young-Hee had worked so hard she felt there was no way the carefree Se-young could possibly best her this time. Yet she did, and just as always, Young-Hee was second in class. Feeling as though she had failed her family and resigning herself to a life of poverty, the worn-down student developed a mental disorder and ended up killing herself. Now fellow students warn of venturing into the library at night, as the sight of Young-Hee's ghost can sometimes be seen, studying away with a demented look on her face. In order to trigger this ghost, you must play on hard mode and have on your possession a report card. The report card belonged to a student who came in second place. This classroom was once witness to a terrifying and bone-chilling incident. You see, there was a student called Na-Hye. She always had perfect grades and was adored by her teacher, much to the frustration of her other classmates who disliked her for being a teacher's pet and acting as if she were better than everyone else. One afternoon, the teacher called up Na-Hye to solve a simple math problem on the chalkboard. Now, while the solution was easy, Na-Hye read the mathematics incorrectly and so failed to solve it. The teacher couldn't believe it. His star student had failed such an easy math problem. So to teach her some humility and not to do it again, Na-Hye's teacher scolded her before the entire class. Unfortunately, this was not the lesson Na-Hye took. Embarrassed as her classmates laughed and jeered, Na-Hye cursed her eyes for failing her when she read the question wrong. So, after class, she took a knife and dug them both out. Now, if we collect up 5 pieces of a math problem from around the high school and enter classroom 211 while holding Na-Hye's blood-stained workbook, we catch sight of her desperately trying to solve the cursed arithmetic.
How is this wrong? That can't be.
Students say that if a math problem is left unfinished around the school, then Na-Hye's eyeless soul will be summoned to complete it. The haunted head ghost is exactly as described, the floating head of a woman who appears at random throughout the school. Her presence is telegraphed by an ominous sound in the air, and eventually she materializes before us and gives chase. The haunted head ghost has a morbid history indeed. One summer, a group of construction workers were renovating the school, but failed to properly secure the safety net. A local woman walked beneath it, and the net collapsed, severing her head. The construction team freaked out and, wishing to avoid charges of negligence, decided to bury the body in cement. And so they did, all but the woman's head, which was never found. Shortly after, a series of accidents took place at the worksite, including the death of a worker who was mangled by a pulley, though his head was strangely unharmed. Once the new building was finished, the leader of the construction team confessed to the cover-up, and shortly after, the woman's severed head was found in the school gardens. While the accident occurred several weeks earlier, the head looked in perfect condition, as if it had been freshly decapitated. Ever since, rumours swirled of a floating head patrolling the school by night, looking to scare anyone who lingered after dark. Yeon-sun was one of the most unpopular girls at the school. She was a quiet, shy, and overweight student who was treated with disdain by both the teachers and her classmates. Now, despite this, there was one teacher who sometimes paid her compliments and treated her with respect. A tall, handsome man who recently filled the role as Korean language teacher at the school. Yeon-sun began to grow feelings for her teacher, and one day plucked up the courage to write him a heartfelt letter professing her love, which she slipped inside the daily attendance sheet for him to find at the beginning of the day. But her plan failed when, the next day, the new teacher ran a little late, and so her gym teacher covered attendance instead. The gym teacher had always been cruel to Yeon-sun and took great pleasure in reading her very personal letter before the entire class. Deeply ashamed and embarrassed, Yeon-sun hoped the Korean language teacher would be the one to stick up for her when he finally arrived late to class. However, upon reading the letter, he instead looked at her with disgust. Devastated, she took her life that very night. Upon entering the classroom where Yeon-sun's humiliation took place, we can summon her furious ghost by collecting the gym teacher's hat and then standing at the front of a classroom to read the attendance list. The attendance ghost storms over as if to try and stop the letter from being found, and her life ruined. In this very dance room, two twin sisters named Ye-eun and Ye-ji used to practice. The school dance department was quite prestigious, and every year a show was put on, with the main role launching the careers of many young dancers into superstardom. When the school put on a dance show, the whole world watched with bated breath. While both sisters were brilliant dancers, it was Ye-ji who received the better reviews and praise. Ye-eun realised her younger sister would be chosen for the main role in the dance show, and so decided to slip some broken glass in her ballet shoes so she would cut her feet and be unable to perform. Ye-ji did cut her feet on the glass during rehearsals, and, just as her sister had planned, was unable to perform in the show. Ye-eun was selected for the starring role and became a teenage dance celebrity overnight. By contrast, Ye-ji fell into despair. Desperate to live up to her sister's newfound fame, she refused to let her wounds heal and continued to dance on them until she injured her feet beyond repair. They became infected and she eventually died. Ye-eun was haunted by this. She had driven her sister into an early grave. One night, while rehearsing in the school dance room, Ye-eun noticed something strange about her reflection in the mirror. Her ballet shoes were covered in blood. This was because her reflection was not actually a reflection at all, but rather the ghost of her twin sister, Ye-ji. The ghost's doppelganger spoke the following words: "I've been copying you perfectly so far, sister. Now it's your turn. You copy me now." Ye-ji then proceeded to wrap her hands around her neck and choke herself to death. We encounter the haunted reflection in a different way. It mirrors central protagonist Hee-min, and is a boss encounter we must overcome. In order to destroy the doppelganger, we must use the dance room's speakers in order to blow out the mirror's glass, dispelling the entity within. When the new building was first built, one particular student was very pleased. Her name was So-hee, and she suffered greatly from arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. The school's old buildings were a nesting ground for these 8-legged terrors, but the new classroom So-hee found herself in each day was bug-free. Although one thing was peculiar about this new class, or rather, one person attending it, a girl with long black hair that hung over her face. She barely moved and never spoke. So-hee was unnerved by the young woman's appearance, which reminded her of a spider somehow. She had even caught her feasting on a moth. One day the strange girl vanished, never to return to class. So-hee found this strange but eventually forgot about her altogether, until one night. Everybody had left school for the day except So-hee, who returned to her classroom to collect the textbook she had left behind. In the corner she noticed a terrifying sight. The spider-like girl had returned and was perched on the ceiling like a spider awaiting its prey. As So-hee prepared to shriek in horror, the spider ghost rushed her, wrapping its long hair around her and pulling her upwards. So-hee was never seen again. There was once two best friends, one named Yeondu and the other Young-Hee. However, these two friends grew apart over a boy they both had feelings for. Yeondu spoke about the boy at great lengths without realizing he actually attended the same church as Young-Hee, information her friend chose to keep private. One day, Yeondu spotted her friend with the boy on a park bench. They seemed very close. In a jealous rage, Yeondu demanded that Young-Hee meet on the school roof to talk things over. But this led to an argument between the two friends, resulting in Yeondu pushing Young-Hee to her death. She fell several stories and landed head first, snapping her neck. Afterwards, Yeondu lied about her friend's death, claiming she had jumped. Sometime after, Yeondu was finally able to date her crush, and one night they decided to meet in the school after dark for a romantic evening. However, her boyfriend never showed. Suddenly, as Yeondu stood in the dark classroom, she heard a loud knocking on the doors of the hallway outside. She stood frozen in the darkness as each door was kicked open and a raspy, yet familiar voice could be heard. A voice which eventually reached her classroom. To witness the ghost of Young-Hee, also known as Face Filled with Hatred, you must crouch down in the very last toilet cubicle of certain bathrooms in main building 1. If you wait long enough, the knocking will commence and Young-Hee's ghost comes searching to seek revenge on her friend. The Hanging Woman, as the name suggests, is the ghost of a student who hung herself. She appears throughout the game at various points and never attacks, but is nonetheless quite unsettling. The Hanging Woman has an interesting story behind her, one which ties into the main story of White Day, and one I have covered in great detail during my Story Explained video. But to summarise, the Hanging Woman was once a senior at the school, and was scheduled to meet her friend, A, outside a classroom. However, she never showed, and a fire broke out, killing A, who had been waiting patiently. The Hanging Woman, who we'll refer to as B, was haunted by A's screams for help, and as the days went by, she began hearing the ghostly call of her deceased friend more and more often. The voice was angry and resentful, filling B with guilt for not showing up to their meeting place and blaming her for the accident. Eventually, B could no longer deal with the nightmarish voice within her head, and so hung herself. As she began to slip into death, she heard A call out once more, but her friend no longer sounded angry. She snickered and whispered to B, "Thanks, I needed you to die so I can live again." Yeondu High School wasn't always used for education. In fact, during the Japanese occupation of Korea, it had been used as a concentration camp for political prisoners. It is said that the camp had several rooms dedicated to human experimentation, whereby prisoners underwent vile and inhumane acts of torture, all in the name of science. The biology lab is rumoured to have once been one of these experimentation rooms. Some say the anatomy mannequin in the corner of the room was once a real person, modified during horrific surgery and now preserved in this gruesome form. While exploring the biology lab, it is possible to wake the mannequin ghost. To do this, we must run around until near exhaustion sets in and our vision becomes a blur. Heart pounding, light the burner beside the mannequin and prepare for a terrifying encounter. If we manage to avoid this unusual ghost for long enough, the flame of the burner will go out and the mannequin returns to his stationary position. Now another ghost added to our collection. The grounds of Yeondu High School featured a big pond full of large, ancient fish. Some of these fish were believed to understand humans, and one student in particular appeared to have an affinity for them. Her name was Dee, and she became the pond custodian, cleaning its waters and feeding the fish each day, who seemed very fond of her. A local bad boy began attending the school and asked Dee out on a date, but due to his brutish and violent nature, she rejected his request and an argument ensued. The bully felt his ego had been bruised and, in the heat of the moment, pushed Dee over. She struck her head on a rock and died instantly. Panicked, the boy cut up Dee's body and fed it to the fish in the nearby pond. No trace of his crime was left. A few months passed and the police gave up their search for Dee. Rumours spread about the school of a shadowy figure appearing in the waters of both the pond and school swimming pool. Then, all of a sudden, the bully who killed Dee went missing himself, only to appear a few days later floating in the swimming pool, his body chewed up as if eaten by an animal. Ever since, the legend of a mermaid circulated throughout the school. We encounter the humanoid fish for ourselves as a boss-type enemy. Hee-min must cross the cursed waters of the pool, using a pair of L-rods to avoid areas where the mermaid patrols. One wrong move and she emerges to drag down her prey. Eventually, the pool is drained and the spirit of the girl, once known as Dee, released. Only appearing on the indoor bridge of the new building, the grandmother ghost is a rare sight indeed. If luck is against us while walking across this bridge, we'll find ourselves frozen to the spot and an eerie, elderly voice begins to speak.
Sweetie, where are you? Come to Grams. Sweetie, where are you? You can't escape. You can't leave this place forever.
This demonic entity is said to claim the soul of whoever answers the question she poses. Surviving requires one to never engage her in conversation. Her origins date back many years to a time where the school grounds were used as a refugee camp. There was a grandmother at the camp who took some of the orphan children under her wing and began caring for them, until one day the children and their ward vanished. After a week or so had passed, a search party went up the nearby mountain hoping to find both the old lady and her children. They happened upon an old rundown shack, and upon venturing inside, were greeted by the stench of rotting flesh and the sight of tiny bones strewn across the floor. They belonged to the missing children. As for the grandmother, well, she was never found. That morbid thought brings us to the conclusion of the Ghosts of White Day Explained. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember to leave me a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for more horror related content. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.